Welcome back to the Mostly All Figured Out podcast. We are back. This is your host, Emily Marciniak-Louie. We are back at the library, but we have a guest on the podcast today. And guest, I'm going to read your biography from the UB page. Is that okay?
Oh, no. I don't think I wrote that one, so I don't know what it's going to say.
No.
It's fine. Go for it. Let's start.
Okay, it's really impressive. So if this stuff is true, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize who I was like sharing space with in the past. Here we go. John D. Okay, what's the D stand for?
David.
That's my dad's name and Jackson's middle name.
In my department, there are two Atkinsons. We are not related. There's Joseph Atkinson and John Atkinson, and so I had the initial just to add a little more space.
I see. Interesting. Yeah, sure. Is Joseph the worst or something?
No, he's the best, actually. He's the best. But yeah, just he's been around longer, so
I see.
He gets the Atkinson email and everything else.
Oh, I see. Right, of course. Okay. John D. Atkinson is an environmental engineering professor at the University of Buffalo, where he created the university's most popular study abroad course. Definitely going to talk about that. And has been recognized as an early career teacher of the year, outstanding director, experiential learning faculty fellow, and best undergraduate mentor. His work is driven by an overarching desire to more sustainably produce and consume, resulting in a diverse portfolio of publications and seminars. With ongoing funding from New York State and the U.S. National Science Foundation, as well as local industry, he is currently researching within the broad field of waste management, using life cycle and analysis tools to investigate plastics and tire recycling, waste disposal options, and energy recovery. His work targets real-world problems that impact everyday life, aiming to make engineering more thoughtful and accessible. Atkinson emboldens lifestyle changes that promote sustainability. He encourages his students to expand their comfort zones, holistically problem solve, and embrace their creativity through engineering design. He received a BS in chemistry from the University of Illinois in 2007, MS in environmental engineering and civil engineering from the University of Illinois, and a PhD in environmental engineering and civil engineering from the University of Illinois. I guess we like the University of Illinois, huh?
A decade. They owe me a plaque or something.
I'm sure.
I was there a really
real.
long time.
Yeah. Wow. Are you from Illinois?
Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. That's our big state school, like
it.
SUNY Buffalo is for New York.
Right. Interesting. What was that like growing up in Illinois? What's it like there?
Worse weather than Buffalo.
No.
Yes.
Don't believe it.
Yes. No, people complain about the weather here, but it doesn't get hot or cold. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Chicago's like 110 in the summer and minus 20 in the winter. Buffalo, we complain when it hits 20.
Right.
And no houses have AC. It's really a narrow range of temperature.
Yeah.
We get a few snowstorms, but that's what winter's for. So.
Well, there was a time, what was it, maybe like 10 years ago, where we were like in the negatives for like a month. That was a rough time. That winter was rough.
Yeah. I moved here 9 years ago.
Okay, so you missed it. I guess you missed it.
Yeah, so for me, it's perfect.
So were you in Chicago, or were you like outside?
We grew up in the suburbs, so
Okay.
northwest suburbs. You know, Chicago's a huge city, so 20 miles out, we still call Chicago, as long as we're not in Chicago.
Sure.
And then went to school in the middle of the state, lots of cornfields, super flat, but a wonderful Big Ten, huge college town.
Yeah.
And then had a quick stopover in Canada for a postdoc before moving to Buffalo.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah. Actually, Buffalo is the nicest weather of anywhere I've lived, because in
Really?
Canada we were in Edmonton, where I think we hit minus 50, minus 55 degrees at some point.
That can't be.
It's
No.
very far north.
Gracious.
Yeah. Great city.
Wow.
Very interesting, but very cold.
The only thing I know about them is that they have a hockey team called the Oilers.
They do.
That's
Yeah, it's an interesting place, because several hours north of Edmonton's the last big city before oil country. So in northern Canada, they have tar sands, oil sands, that are a big global source of oil. And so that's where the Oilers comes from.
It makes sense because of logistics, but kind of a strange name for a hockey team, if you ask me. I don't know. I could think of a few other names.
Yeah, you could dive into a bunch of them. At least it's not, derogatory or something like that. So
yeah, like racist or something. Yeah. That's true. So, do you have any siblings?
I have 2 siblings.
Okay.
I have an older sister and a younger brother.
And are they still in Illinois, or do they?
They're still in Illinois. All 3 of us work in education.
Oh, wow.
My little brother's a middle school principal.
Cute.
And my sister works at the University of Chicago.
Oh, very cool.
So she works in career advisement for students.
So why do you think that is, that you all decided to go into education? Were your parents educators?
Nope. We're first-generation college students, and my mom has worked in schools. She's a middle school secretary. My father's an auto mechanic. We were taught to value education. Mm-hmm. We were taught that when all the cards are down, so to speak, education is what sets you apart. And so I think we want to give that back in some way, shape, or form. And so for me, it's being a professor. For my brother, it's being an administrator. Mm-hmm. And for my sister, it's working directly with the students to help them get to the next step. So it wasn't planned. I don't think any of us thought that's where we'd end up.
Yeah.
but it is what it is. So
that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So what about, how did you get into your specialty? Were you just always particularly interested in the environment and waste management, Did you love garbage trucks as a kid?
Yeah, let's talk trash.
Yeah.
It's the worst joke for anybody, but I had to use it. I'll use it early. No, it's a longer story, but my undergraduate degrees are in chemistry and math, and I was good at those things. Mm-hmm. I got good grades in those classes. I'm not sure I had the passion for them that is necessary to do it for your whole life, but I think you start out in college with what you're good at, and that's what I was good at. And so towards the end of my undergraduate degree, I was doing some research in a lab, which is what a lot of chemist students do at University of Illinois. And I was thinking about the work that I was doing and the team that I was on, and I realized I didn't understand the work that I was doing. It was so fundamental that I couldn't describe it to my family. I couldn't describe it to people that weren't deep into chemistry, which led me to think, why the hell am I doing this? If you can't explain what you're doing and you can't relate it to everyone else outside of the ivory tower that is academia, then why bother?
Yeah.
And so that, combined with a couple great professors in environmental chemistry, moved me over to engineering, which I think of environmental engineering and the work that I do as applied chemistry. It's chemistry with a tangible element. It's not a dig at the fundamental chemistry. That is incredibly important and has a very good place. It's just not for me. It wasn't what I wanted to be doing, and so I moved into chemistry and environmental engineering, and day to day I was doing the same stuff I was doing as a chemist. But now I could tell the whole story. I could see the whole story. I could say, I'm building these things that prevent this type of pollution and improve air quality to help these people, and it was more so what I wanted to be doing. So I did that for a while. I describe myself as a carbon scientist. I was making different adsorbent materials that prevent air pollution from getting out into the air. The problem with air pollution is once it's out there, you can't do anything about it.
Right.
So you instead try to prevent its release, and that's what I was trying to do. Think of all the stuff in the back of your car that prevents the air pollution from getting released.
Oh.
The catalytic converters and the filters and things like that are all there to prevent air pollution. Mm-hmm. So I was working on materials for power plants and different stuff like that. Mm-hmm. bounced around, had some diversity in the projects I did. Was fortunate to be able to study quite a bit in Asia with some interesting collaborators there.
Cool.
And then all that kind of led me to Buffalo, where I started off doing exactly the same stuff. That's what new faculty do, is they kind of leverage their experiences as a PhD student and a postdoc. They find some twists to make it their own, to separate themselves from the work that they were doing with their colleagues as a student. And that's how I started. I was making, instead of carbon materials, I was making different polymeric materials, which is ironic because I now study plastic.
What is polymeric?
Plastics are polymers. So it's
okay.
long chains of organic molecules, basically.
Right. Interesting. So you were creating.
Yeah, we were building materials, and we were writing great papers, and
Interesting, yeah.
and students were graduating and getting grants and stuff like that. But I kind of realized that I was falling into my old ways, in that I was doing research to write papers, which is an important part of academics, and it's how the story gets out there. Mm-hmm. But I had switched into engineering to have this tangible impact. That was the objective.
Right.
And now I was falling back into the paper writing focus.
Right.
Not doing it for people, but doing it for papers.
Yeah.
And so I looked at what I was teaching and the students I was around and what I was doing with my own life, and that kind of led me to sustainability. And it was, a place where we have an urgency. Mm-hmm. It was a field where it touches everybody.
Yeah.
And I think we have an opportunity to improve in some very tangible ways. So that's sustainability broadly, but waste management, I think, is an aspect that is totally undervalued. 10 times a day, 20 times a day, we're interacting with waste.
Yeah.
Right? Toilet paper, garbage cans, recycling bins, compost bins. This is a part of our daily life that is 100% taken for granted. It is not thought about.
Yeah.
Fine, you might look at that and say, well, is it recyclable, is it not?
Sure.
Pick one bin versus the other. But even that's pretty high level,
yeah.
Right? Most people are just throw it away, out of sight, out of mind. Somebody else will deal with it. And that's a problem. That's why we generate, almost 5 pounds of waste a day per person.
Oh, gracious.
Exactly. It's why we have, Amazon boxes coming daily, and we have leaves and compost that we don't know where it's going. And I make a joke, but it's not that big of a joke. If you pull a random person off the street and you ask them about trash, they will talk to you as though there is a magic trick occurring. And what I mean by that is they'll say, I roll out my bin before work on Monday and I come back and it's gone. And that's all they know.
Yeah.
A highly educated, very thoughtful, environmentally conscious person, that's all they know.
Yeah.
They don't know, is it the city picking it up? Is it a private company? Is it going to a landfill? Is it being burned? What happens to those leaf bags? Are they going to a compost facility? Where is that facility? Or are they just throwing it out and making us think that it's going to all of that is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And we just, in the U.S., we have this out of sight, out of mind approach that it's not my issue as long. The only time we think about our trash is when it doesn't get picked up.
Yeah.
And we have to complain to 311 that, what the hell? What, my bin is full. What am I going to do for the week? Mm-hmm. It's the only time it becomes relevant. It's the only time we realize how much we generate.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because yeah, I 100% agree with that, but I also think part of it is just the assumption that, like, blind trust, they must be taking care of it, right? I'm recycling properly, I think. I don't really know what that means, actually. There's numbers. I don't know. My son Jackson was telling me, like, if it's a number 5, or it's a number 4. I was like, wait, what? There's numbers? What is this?
Well, that's
like,
awesome.
Don't even
that
bother, Mom, if it's a number this. And I was like,
it's great to hear, though, that kids are learning this. That's an improvement for sure. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but as grown adults, I have no freaking clue. Like, every time I go to rinse out a milk carton, I'm like, is there even, like, am I doing this for any reason? Like, because I'm busy, So it's like, does this even matter? I don't know. Like, and where is it? I think you taught me this, I think, once at a Creative Mornings thing or something, that you shouldn't put it in plastic bags, like not to put it in plastic bags. And I wonder how many people are putting recycling in plastic bags, like a garbage bag.
Yeah.
Because that like just automatically disqualifies, right?
Well, it doesn't. It's a problem for the sorting facilities that receive the recycling. So they have these screens that rotate, and when you add things that can tangle them up into the mix, it causes them to shut down the system. So many times a day they have to turn everything off, go in with razor blades and cut out all those bags and the Christmas light strands and anything else that can tangle up those screens to remove them so that the process can proceed as best as it can. It's a tricky thing. Think of all the different materials that you put in your recycling bin. So you got all the different plastics. Some of those plastics that you're putting in aren't just one type, they're multiple types. You have big things, you have little things, you have cardboard, you have paper. You have glass breaks, so now you have sharp things. You have metal, you have different kinds of metal.
Yeah.
And all of those things go into one bin.
Right.
And then it goes to one building that has to separate them into all the different categories. Yeah. And they have to do it as best as they can with the best technology that they can afford.
Right. Because it's a massive volume also that they're
dealing
with.
So right. We're a big city. Yeah. It's incredibly impressive how quickly these lines are moving. Just conveyor belts, and a big piece of this is manual labor too. I mean, we think that everything's done by robots and lasers and sensors, but a huge chunk of recycling sorting today is still people literally picking things off of a conveyor belt and throwing them into the right bin. Yeah. And so if we introduce things that don't allow that or complicate that, sharp things that not only mess up people's hands but mess up the conveyor belts themselves, they're abrasive, incorrect things that are too big, too small, it just makes an already incredibly complicated process with very thin margins that much more complicated.
Yeah.
And when you take something that is already an economic struggle and you make it harder, you can tilt something from slightly profitable to not profitable.
Yeah.
And throw off the balance of an entire system. And frankly, send a whole bunch of waste that could otherwise be recycled to a landfill. And so you need to have that connection. You need to know what that plastic bag means, or what it means to be like, well, my garbage bin's full, but I got all this space in my recycling bin, so I'll just throw that cinder block in there. Or, as long as it's gone, it's one thing. It's not going to really matter. It matters. It matters immensely.
Yeah. So how much, do you have an idea of like what percentage of recycling that gets sent over there actually makes it to being recycled?
Yeah, so it's, I mean, we could go into the technical aspects of it, but I'll try to go kind of material by material as clearly as I can. So paper and cardboard are very valuable. They get recycled.
Cool.
We're very good at paper and cardboard. And one of the reasons we're very good at it is because it has a lot of value. So think of all the shipments and things that you're receiving. All of that is most likely recycled cardboard that, comes from an old box and goes back into a new box. You can recycle cardboard about 7 or 8 times before it can't be recycled anymore, which is not so bad. That's great reuse. So
how do you know that it's been recycled 7 or 8 times?
You don't.
Okay.
So it has to do with the companies that kind of reclaim it and turn it back into the material. Basically, there's long fibers, and they get a little bit shorter each time, and eventually they get too short to be valuable.
Got it. Interesting.
But in general, cardboard and paper are great. Keep throwing it in the bins. If it's easy, if you have a cardboard box, break it down, rip off any tape that you can, but don't cut it up, nothing like that. Just put in a scrunched down box, and that will almost guaranteed get recycled.
Okay. If there's tape still on it.
The facilities that separate and remake the cardboard have capacity to remove that.
Okay.
But less is more.
Right.
It's kind of the
right.
attitude. Again, fine margins on a lot of this stuff. So if you can make
Yeah.
it easier for people downstream,
Sure.
that will
Yeah.
recycling is an economic question.
Yeah.
We will recycle things that we can make money off of.
Yeah.
If we can't make money off of it, we're not
We'll
going to recycle it, right?
Yeah.
And so as a consumer, as a household, if you can do anything to make that easier, you should do it.
Yeah.
That will facilitate the recycling process. So paper, cardboard, good. The other end of the spectrum is glass. Glass, not good. I think even me, like going back to childhood, I think, glass is like quintessential recycling to me. You throw it in the bin. It's wonderful. But the reality is that glass is really complicated.
Yeah.
For lots of reasons. And there's, again, things that we take for granted. It's heavy. It weighs a lot, and that's tricky to deal with. It breaks, right? Think of what happens. You see this thing throwing the waste into the truck, and then it smashes it all down.
Right. No way that glass is making it.
Exactly. And so now you have these little tiny shards of glass that are, in a process that has a lot of manual sorting. So you have people, it just doesn't track. It's not possible.
Right.
And then the back end, the economic piece, you have Corona bottles are clear, Heineken bottles are green, Blue Light bottles are brown. Nobody wants a combination of those.
Right.
It's literally called gray glass because you mix all the colors together and it looks gray. And so that's not a desirable material, mixed glass. And so the truth is that most glass that you put in your recycling bin goes to a landfill. It gets kind of filtered out because it's small. It just falls through everything, and then they sweep it up and send it to a landfill. It's not because the material can't be recycled. It can. It's actually fairly straightforward, but it's a sorting and an economics issue.
Yeah. For the sorting side of the issue, if we're talking about like bottles, like beer bottles, do they have a better chance if you bring them to like a bottle place, redemption place? Yeah. Yeah,
so New York State, I want to say there's 11 of them. I can't remember the exact number, but we're a bottle deposit state, and if you can deposit your bottles, you should. Again, think of what that means. So we've been talking about sorting and using kind of a centralized facility to sort. Well, what a bottle redemption site is doing is putting the sorting on the consumer. So again, if you can do something to make recycling easier, to make it more economic, you should. And that is what bottle deposits are. It's removing the sorting facility.
Right.
And putting that on you. So you got to drive to the store, you're sort of motivated by getting your nickel back, but either way, it's making that sorting process easier.
Yeah.
Of course, you put the glass in, you still hear it break, which is unfortunate. Some facilities, I think, are trying to do it a little bit more gently. Some of the more state of the art ones, but it does facilitate it for sure.
Are there any locally that you would recommend, or not really?
I don't have a preference. I mean, I think just doing it is great.
That like gently cradle the bottle.
There's a facility over by Hyatt's on Elmwood. It's called Clean Loop that is very
up in
advanced.
North Buffalo.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's more advanced than any others that I've seen. I don't know if they're doing it better or worse per se, but it's very convenient to bring your stuff there, and then they seem to have a well-oiled machine, if you will, that works well.
So let's talk about the leaves. Where are they going? Where's the compost going? Also, composting in general, I want to talk about. So I've wanted to compost, okay, but I'm scared. I'm not gonna lie, I'm scared. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how I start doing it. I don't know where it goes. Who's coming to get it? Do I just put it out? Are there going to be worms in my house? Like, do I leave it outside? Do I leave it inside? You know?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So composting is great.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. So it is recovering the nutrient content from the organic materials, that the organic waste that you have, and creating a high value supplement, basically, that can be used in further agricultural applications. It is chemically, biologically complicated, for sure. There's you hear things like the carbon to nitrogen ratio, and if you're at home composting, people talk about the ratio of brown things to green things.
Oh.
And all of that is very relevant, but a 60-second YouTube video will clarify it all, right? It doesn't need to be that hard. It doesn't smell. If you're doing it right, it shouldn't smell.
Okay. Even though it's rotting
shouldn't
food?
Yeah. Because if the bad stuff gets consumed in a way that is, not generating the gases that we associate with the odors, the ammonias and the things like that.
So you can just take a bucket, maybe one with a cover, and then you just, I finished my banana, gonna put the skin in there.
Yep.
Or like peeled my potatoes, gonna throw those in there.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you how we do it. So we have, I don't know, maybe it's 1.5 gallon, 2 gallon bucket. It has a lid. The lid has some kind of carbon filters just in case there's residual odors, depending on, if you put the wrong thing in or whatever it might be. So we fill that up in the kitchen. You have it next to us when we're cutting vegetables. I put my coffee filters, coffee grounds in there. Eggshells can go in there. You want to avoid protein.
Okay.
So you shouldn't put meat in there.
That'll smell for sure.
Yeah. It also, animals like it, and that can be a problem.
Right.
And, of course, avoid plastic and metals and stuff like that. But, I've seen people put paper towels in their compost as long as there's no chemicals on them. If you're just using it to clean up water or something, then by all means. But if you're using it to clean, don't do that. Newspapers, people put lots of different things. All of that is organic material, and it's fibrous and okay. So once that little thing gets filled, we have a barrel, kind of a barrel laying on its side on the side of our house that we put that into, or that we have historically put that into. We mix it with leaves and grass clippings we just have a small yard, so it doesn't fill up too quickly. Rotate it every now and then, and at the end of the season, we will coat the garden and the flower beds with it, and or give it to one of the local composting groups to add to their much larger scaled system, and kind of roll from there. So we've been doing that for 6 or 7 years. It's not complicated. That the capital cost, if you will, the input is non-negligible. Buying the bucket for inside and something for outside is not zero cost, but it's not hugely expensive, maybe a couple $100 or $100, something like that.
Okay.
But now the city of Buffalo has a home compost pilot program that you might see these little brown, they look like mini garbage cans. So people, roll out their recycling bin and their garbage bin, and now they're rolling out this little brown bin.
Oh, yes, I have seen.
Yeah. So it's actually a huge beta program, far more houses than I expected to see in it. But it's basically city-level composting for food scraps. So you can't put leaves in there. It's not meant for yard waste. That's another system.
Yeah.
But you still collect it in your bucket in the house, and instead of bringing it to the barrel or whatever system you have, you bring it to the trash can and the compost can, and they pick it up once a week, and they take it to, they're working with a group called Farmer Pirates. They take it to their, I don't know, their place, I guess, where they have larger scale composting and mix it all together and roll from there. So I don't work for the city. I don't know if it's considered a successful beta program, but it's been great to see all of that getting done, and the number of those bins that I see is like, I think half the houses on my street probably have them. And the thing with food scraps is they decompose really quickly. That can be a pro and that can be a con. From the composting perspective, that's great, because you're breaking down, you're decreasing the volume, you're generating this valuable product that can go into farms or yards or wherever it might be. But if those food scraps go to a landfill, they will also decompose very quickly, and they will create a gas that's called methane. And methane is a very, very strong greenhouse gas. Depending on who you ask and what metric you use, it can be 85 times worse than carbon dioxide, the gas that we're all somewhat familiar with for greenhouse gases.
Right.
And so a landfill is basically the worst place for your food scraps to end up from a climate perspective. And if we can not have them in the trash can, that would be wonderful.
Okay, so I'm going to start composting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really upsetting.
Yeah. See if there's
more people should know that.
Yeah. It's food scraps are bad, and a lot of our waste is food scraps. A lot of like the kind of per capita waste that we generate is food scraps.
Right.
I mean, and that doesn't. I mean, we aren't necessarily efficient in eating everything on our plates, probably, but it's also just a lot of the kind of inherent waste that comes from eating vegetables or your banana peels, the things that apple cores that you can't get away from.
Can you put like you don't want to put processed foods in there, right?
No.
Just like vegetables and fruits, really.
Yeah.
Maybe grains.
Not
grains.
Not grains, I would
like
say.
Carbs, like you don't want to put pasta in there.
No.
So just stuff that comes from the earth.
Yep.
Fruits and veggies. Got it. But not animals or fish.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, that should be easy enough, shouldn't it?
Should be.
Yeah.
Should be. And that's why it really makes me happy to see the city making it easier, because there is that capital, right? Not everybody can afford or be, has the privilege to prioritize buying a nice compost barrel for the side of their house. That is very clear. And so for the city to kind of recognize that and say, we have this big problem. We can't be sending food scraps to a landfill, but not everybody can deal with that individually. Let's see what a citywide program looks like. That's pretty cool to me, and it could be high impact.
It could be high impact, and I think even just like it's going to get people talking about what is composting and why is this something that the city's prioritizing? Is this something that I need to think about? Like, because if you think about it, I mean, certainly when I was a kid, this was not on my radar. This was not on my parents' radar. Even like 10 years ago, I don't think I really knew what composting was.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
It's a very good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see across the country kind of city-level composting programs more and more.
Yeah.
And it's a recognition of the severity of the issue with food scraps going to landfills. I don't know if people know this, but your trash can, whatever goes in your trash can, it can go to one of two places. There's no in between. It can go to a landfill and be just dumped there, or it can be burned. Nobody's sorting it. Nobody's pulling out anything. It's just going to one of those two places. And so if you put food in there, it's either going to be burned or it's going to be landfilled. Most likely landfilled in the U.S. We don't use incineration very much. And so you need to have that in mind. You need to think about what you're putting in there, where it's going to end up, and what happens to it there. And so that's why composting is so essential. Yeah,
and it seems more and more accessible now, which is great. I think every time I go to Niagara Falls and you pass the landfill area, my 8-year-old, as you know, was asking me questions about it recently. I'm trying to remember. I think he was just like, well, how does it get in there? And then what happens to it? And what if we run out of space here? Can you answer any of those questions? Because I really couldn't.
Well, I mean, the U.S. is fortunate to be enormous.
Yeah.
And what that means is we can have lots of landfills.
Yeah.
It can be cheap to landfill.
Is that our only landfill in this area?
There's landfills all over the place.
Really?
So yeah.
In my
all,
head,
all
that's
through
like
the U.S.
the Western New York landfill.
No, there's thousands of landfills in the U.S.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, regionally, I'm not saying there's one in every backyard.
Okay,
right?
I was about to be like, wait.
No.
Where?
Yeah. Surprise. But we can afford to just dig a hole in the ground and throw waste there. And when you say it that way, it's absurd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's what a landfill is. And yes, they're highly engineered, very technically advanced, especially the new landfills. There's much more to it. All the gases that are generated are not necessarily released. They can capture some and they can make energy from it and blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
But that's still not getting away from the fact that we're throwing waste in a hole in the ground, a potentially valuable resource. And so I think that if you look at countries that don't have the privilege, I suppose, of having lots of space. If you look at island nations, they don't have space to have landfills. They still generate waste, maybe not as bad as we do in the U.S., but they burn that waste. They view that waste as a resource because they have to. They don't have another place to put it, and they don't, frankly, have tons of resources of their own. They're a small little island country, and so their landfill taxes, or we call them tipping fees, the fee to tip a dumpster into a landfill, basically, are incredibly high because they don't want it. They can't afford to have it. And so only very specialized, expensive, no other option possible wastes are going into landfills. But here, we fill one up, we just dig another one. And as a result, it's relatively cheap, and so it's not a heavily taxed process, and we rely on it.
Wow, it's wild. I don't know. The whole landfill thing is just so. I remember when I first learned about it as a kid. Like, where does this go? Oh, it just goes in the ground. We just put it in the ground.
Yeah.
You see those mountains over there? As we head over to see one of the 7 wonders of the world. It's full of shit.
Yeah, I mean they're easy to spot. If you drive by and you see kind of low hills with white poles sticking out
of them,
that's a covered landfill. Those little poles, those little tubes are vents for the gases that continue to be generated for decades potentially after it closes, because you still have things compressing and generating these gases. When you think about it, for 10 seconds, it's obvious. It's ridiculous. That is not what we should be doing. This is an energy-dense, nutrient-dense, fossil fuel-dense, if you're talking about plastics, material that has inherent value baked into it.
Yeah.
It should not just be going into a hole in the ground. And so I think the world of plastics has brought more knowledge, more kind of public knowledge to landfills, because people know that plastics don't degrade. They know that we're not very great at recycling plastics right now, and so you're seeing more and more news articles about these materials that just sit there for literally ever. Obviously, we have some issues with plastics, but if I had to extract a positive from it, I think the recognition of plastics in landfills kind of taking up space basically has been a positive.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now we got to fix it, but,
right.
but at least people are more aware of it. Yeah.
Right. To wrap this up in a way that myself and people who are listening can take away is like the best way for them to manage their waste in a way that is helpful.
Yeah.
So we should all compost. I also think I'm going to look into it. I feel like Amherst also started some kind of program where there's someone that will come and pick up your compost. I feel like a lot of the suburbs have been doing that as well. So definitely check out wherever you live what your town or village or city is doing for that. But is there any... And
sorry to interrupt, but there's also, I mean, there's, even if your city does not have a formal program, we talked about having your own kind of backyard compost for your garden or whatever that might be. There's also ways, in some places you can take your compost to facilities that will process it for you. So it is a case by case, municipality by municipality, city by city. You do need to research it. But given trendiness, if you will, of composting these days, which is, I applaud, largely because of policies within New York State, which are great.
Yeah.
Trying to get more composting. There's lots of information out there. You can certainly just Google your town name and compost program, and it will tell you exactly what to do.
Awesome. So we're all going to do that. We're all going to really continue. I think probably most people who are consciously recycling are thinking about what they're putting in there. So don't put your Christmas lights or any plastic bags in there. Break down your box. If you don't break down your box, that's okay, right? Because
it's okay.
I don't usually do that.
It's okay, but if you can,
right,
it takes up less space.
Make it easier. Yeah. Rip that tape off if you have 2 seconds, because it's saving some time and it's gonna help things out. Bring your bottles to a bottle redemption place versus dumping them in your recycling bin. They have a better chance. Yeah, and just I think probably just like you said, we interact with waste 10 to 20 times a day. Think about it a little bit more.
Think about it more, and then I would wrap up by saying, generate less.
Yeah.
Really, whatever you can, reusable water bottles.
Glass.
It's small, but those things are small, and they're not going to save the planet.
I got it from Amazon, so.
But it came in a box with lots of waste.
It did.
Yeah, but I do think that the amount of waste that we generate in the U.S., I said it earlier, I think we're 4.5 pounds a day or so per person. It's just too much.
Yeah.
And by waste, I don't mean trash can. Your recyclables are waste. Your food scraps are waste. Even if they're composted or recycled, they still fall into that waste category. So think about that. Think about, even things like combining shipping and anything you can do to generate less is impactful.
Yeah.
And that comes from just thinking about it.
Yeah. Just being conscious.
Yep.
Love that. Let's talk about your students and some of the things from your bio here. First of all, I want to know about the study abroad program. And then I also want to know about how you got the title of Best Undergrad Mentor, which is not surprising to me as someone who's known you for a few years now. But
that's a quick one. That we have some summer research programs, and that particular year, my students really liked me. So
just that one year. After that, all.
Yeah, they gave me a trophy, and that was wonderful.
But I'm assuming, but why is that important to you? Like, why do you feel like, especially with undergraduate students, mentoring them and in a way that obviously is impacting them, that they feel like you deserve a trophy for it?
Well, I mean, I value education, and I think sometimes that gets lost in academics, right? We think of faculty as researchers. We think of them as grumpy old white men with this ivory tower mindset of it's us and them, and our job is to make it hard on the students. That's absurd, right? We are educators. We are in this business to educate. Part of our education is doing things like this, being on a podcast to talk about trash. Part of our education is working with graduate students and writing papers and getting grants. Part of it is teaching in a classroom, and part of it is being accessible and relatable to undergraduate students that are trying to figure out what the hell they want to do with their lives. And I love that. Yeah. That's why I do it. It's not to shut my door and isolate myself from the students. No, that is backwards in every way. Mm-hmm. So I do what I can, within the different hats that we have to wear to work with students and let them know what it means to be an engineer in the real world. And some love that, And that year I got a trophy that said they liked it. So that was fun.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a student that was like, you're the worst and I don't like you at all?
Yeah. I mean, I think, so I'm an engineering professor, and engineering is lots of math and lots of equations and lots of numbers. And that is an important part of engineering. But for me, I would argue that it's one of the least important parts of engineering. And every now and then I'll get a student that really wants to solve math problems and wants, has sort of made a college career out of being the best at solving complicated math problems quickly. And all of a sudden I ask them what they think about something, and that's hard for them. And they don't like that. They want to just solve math problems, and more power to them. They will have impact in their own way, and that is, again, a very important part of engineering. But I prefer to prioritize communication and thinking and problem solving and being able to take what you know and tell somebody who doesn't understand it that it's important. And, that's tricky.
So tell me about the study abroad program.
As an undergraduate student myself, I could not study abroad. It was very expensive. It was, the idea of a semester in another country was just not feasible for lots of different reasons.
Yeah.
But when I was in grad school, I found a way to get other people to pay for it, basically. I got some research funding to go to China and Taiwan and complete some of my dissertation there. And it was life-changing.
So cool.
It was entirely life-changing. And the research was not the life-changing part of it. The research in China and Taiwan was the exact same as in Illinois. Go to a lab, do your experiments, collect your data, work on a computer, have colleagues and mentors, and go about your day. But the life-changing part of it was the food and the friends and the getting lost on the train and struggling with communication and hiking and whatever else was involved with just living in another place.
Yeah.
So very fortunate, very privileged to be able to do that. And so kind of had this in my mind that this can be a hugely impactful opportunity. So flash forward, I'm at UB. I basically, in my first couple of years at UB, I was polling students to see who was studying abroad, what kind of numbers we had. And the truth was they were very low for all the same reasons. Expensive, very dense curriculum. You go for a semester, it costs you a year because you get behind, and it's very problematic. So only the very few people that really knew from day one that they wanted to do this were able to do it. So I said, well, we got to provide more opportunities, basically, because this can change lives. I mean, it sounds so cheesy, but it's the truth. And so I, through some friends and some programs at UB, was connected with collaborators in Costa Rica. I was able to travel there and kind of experience what the students would experience. And I was kind of on the fence, but within just a handful of hours, basically, of engaging with these people, I said, I got to come back and I got to do it with students. And so this was in 2017 or so. We ran the program for the first time. We go to Costa Rica in the winter. Of course, a 6-month or a 12-month international experience is exponentially better than the 3 weeks that I can provide in January. But 3 weeks is infinitely better than nothing.
Yeah.
And so we go to Costa Rica. It's a sustainability-focused trip. We study and experience energy, agriculture systems, and ecotourism. These are concepts that are part of Costa Rica. They're incredibly important to their economy and their pride and so many kind of aspects of Costa Rica. But we don't necessarily appreciate them as much in the U.S. We don't learn about our agricultural systems here. We don't know where our food comes from.
Yeah.
We know energy is important, but it's kind of like in between majors sometimes. So everybody touches on it, but it's a tough thing to go into a lot of detail in an undergraduate degree. And ecotourism, most aren't even really familiar with that word, and so we focus on those three things. But it's really about getting outside of comfort zones. Students live with host families for part of the trip.
Cool.
They, eat traditional food. We're not going to the super heavy tourist locations. We're going to small towns that students probably couldn't find on a map, but those places offer just amazing opportunities to learn from Costa Ricans. Is really what it's all about. We're not there to build sidewalks or help Costa Ricans. They don't need our help, right? They're doing just fine, just fine on their own. So we're there to learn from them the things that they do better than us. they're 99% renewable electricity.
Wow.
It's all from geothermal and solar and hydroelectric and wind power.
Wow.
We're not.
No.
In case you didn't know that, we're not. Yeah, we still like our
Wow.
fossil fuels. And so
Yeah.
there's something to learn there. There's a lot to learn
incredible.
there. And
Yeah.
so that's why we do it. And engineering education for me is not about facts. It's not about, what anybody with a cell phone can Google. I think it's cool how a hydroelectric plant works. I think it's really cool. But the truth is, memorizing that has no value. Because you're always going to have, I used to say you're always going to have a textbook. Now you're always going to have a cell phone or Wikipedia or something within inches of yourself. So what's important is understanding how people are affected by that. Who's affected by it? Who's making money? Who's losing money?
Right.
How is the environment affected? Who's displaced by this giant dam and the lake that it forms behind it? Were they forcibly removed? Did they have a say in it? Why? Why not? Who's affected? Where is that energy going? Is it going to other countries? Is it going to the neighbors that are affected by it? Do they pay more? Do they pay less? All of these things are the questions that matter. And that's what we really try to dig into. So it's a very interdisciplinary group. Everybody comes at the same problems from different angles. And that's something that the traditional academic setting struggles to afford. We think about our major and kind of moving through 4 years with the same cohort and the same professors. And that's missing an opportunity. I understand why it's there.
Sure.
But the chance to put, a mechanical engineer with an environmental engineer is actually unique. And that's unfortunate, but it's a reality. Let alone, the biology student with the mechanical engineer, or the architecture student, or the artist with the engineers. One year we had a student who was studying photography as
Cool.
one of the students on the trip. And not only did that mean we got great pictures, it also meant that we got great perspective or different perspective into some of these problems. And the thinking and the conversation and the discomfort that come from that is where the students learn.
Yeah.
It's not from, regurgitating the schematic drawing of a wind turbine or, calculating the efficiency of it. I have news for all engineering students out there. You're never going to be smarter than a robot. You're never going to solve math problems faster. I don't care if you're the fastest. You're not faster than a computer.
Yeah.
And so you need to set yourself apart with the way that you communicate and the way that you think and humor and empathy and creativity. And that's what comes from a study abroad trip. So we go for 18 days, and it's dense, but it's fun. And it's also Costa Rica in January. So
I want to go.
Yeah.
Do I have to be a student?
No,
I want to go. Can I be like
let's
an
make
assistant?
it happen. Let's make it happen. Yeah, we
Seriously.
can. We'll bring your perspective, and that'll be great.
I have perspective.
Yeah.
100%. That sounds really, really cool. So you do this every year?
So we did it for 3 years. Then we had a 3-year break for COVID.
Sure.
And now this will be our second year
Awesome.
post-COVID. But
Awesome.
every year we could do it, we've done it.
Nice.
So I love it.
Yeah.
I would say educationally it's the highest impact thing that I do. It's unfortunate
cool.
that I can only do it with 20 students, but
Yeah. But you do it every year. So it's 20 more every year. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Last question for you. It's a deep one. Let's imagine, okay, that it's your last day on Earth, okay? You've had a super colorful, wonderful life. Everything that you wanted to do, you did. You've achieved all the things. You feel really proud of yourself, whatever. You have wonderful relationships, very fulfilled. What are the 3 things that you learned or picked up along the way that you want to leave behind before you go?
Well, this might be I feel like everybody on every podcast and every book and program right now says this, but I would argue it's the most important thing, and that's that your vote matters. This trickles into sustainability, climate change, obviously all the other things that we're seeing on the TV and newspapers these days, but voting matters. And if you want to make change, you need to be voting for the people that can help make that change. So I think every young person, as early as possible, needs to be told your vote counts, and you need to get out there and prioritize that. You need to reviews out there, what they think, what they say, and pick the people that, you know, are going to represent what you want them to represent. The second one I would say is that, you know, consistent with what I've been talking about, engineering is more than numbers. I think we have stereotypes of what an engineer is. A nerd, a robot, can't communicate. And those stereotypes exist for a very good reason. They're often true. And we need to be better than that. Engineering needs to be better than that. We need to be collaborating with different people, and we need to be empathetic and not break everything down to some number that may or may not be understood by you know, the people that are digesting the information. And so communication skills, thoughtfulness, creativity are not empathy, God forbid, are not words that we have traditionally associated with engineering, but we need to. And the education systems, the way that we train engineers, need to shift to prioritize those things over memorizing numbers and equations. And I don't know if that's a controversial opinion. I don't think it should be, but you know, I always have to add the caveat that math is important, and engineering is very hard. If you don't like math, don't become an engineer. But it shouldn't be the only aspect.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the second thing. And the last thing I would just say is that personal changes can have impact. Every individual one that you do is maybe insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but you need to think more broadly about it. You need to think about how your change is influencing other people to change, or, you know, dictating the conversations around the dinner table about how you learned in school about the numbers on plastic bottles. You know, that your 8-year-old son's conversation in school affected you and influenced this podcast, which is now going to influence many millions of people.
That's right.
I suspect.
Millions.
And so, you know, those little things do matter.
Yeah.
I think the big things, the voting and stuff like that is essential.
Yeah.
But it should not be an excuse to not make personal changes, to not increase personal awareness. You can't just blame it all on the oil companies. They're a big part of it, but the little things that we as individuals can do matter, and that starts with education. It starts with awareness. It starts with Googling that thing you're not sure of and asking those questions and finding those answers and then reacting accordingly. So that's my third one.
I love it.
Did I pass?
You did.
Okay.
We'll allow it.
Okay, good.
No, this was great. Thank you so much for your time and for
fun.
Educating all of us as the educator you are. I really appreciate it. I definitely learned a lot from this, so I'm excited to report my findings to Jackson at dinner tonight, so that will be good.
Fantastic.
But thank you again for coming and joining us on the podcast today.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked it, please share with all your people who need to be better at their waste management. And we all do. Let's be honest, we all do. So please share this. Tell your friends. I don't know. I haven't said it in a while. Rate and review the podcast. Sure, why not? It's great. That helps. I post like once a week on Instagram, so definitely follow that at Mostly All Figured Out. And that's it. I hope everybody's having a good week. Talk to you sometime in the future. Bye.